Hi, everybody. First, a warm welcome to our audience. This session is about policy and what Europe does in order to advance gender equality. My name is Anne, and I work for ISFE in Brussels, which is the European trade body that represents the European video game sector. Our day-to-day work is mainly to interact with the European institutions on various topics and legislative proposals that matters to our industry. We're also the organization behind the key facts on the various industry data, gameplay data, etc., that we present annually each year that you can also see at a forthcoming slide. ISFE joined Women in Games as corporate ambassador last year, and we are really excited to continue the work with the Women in Games this year. And we are working with the Women in Games team in order to update their diversity guide that will be distributed through our members network of national trade associations across the European various countries. And tomorrow you can join our booth that we're hosting for a full day where you can learn much more about what our members are doing locally across Europe in order to create a level playing field for women in the games industry. It is also a great idea to join us if you want to give us some feedback, input on the forthcoming edition of the Diversity Guide. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. For this session, I am pleased to be joined by June Laura Kingston from the European Commission, who has kindly accepted our invitation. And June is here to bring the European policy perspective to our audience and also into this festival. Before we kick off our talk with June, we want to hear your questions. So please use the Q&A function to ask questions after our talk. I think June's and my aim for this session is really to bring Europe's perspective and Europe's effort to advance this topic, because it is one of the priorities of this European legislative mandate. And also, knowing what is happening on the policy front, that is important, because that can also support to drive change, and policy should obviously do that. And hopefully today's session will allow you to bring something back with a bit of new knowledge and perhaps even trigger some action on your behalf as well. June, you are Head of Unit Accessibility, Multilingualism and Safer Internet at the Directorate General for Communications and Networks, Content and Technology at the European Commission. It's a very long name for what we say in Brussels, DG Connect. But you're also the Gender Equality Coordinator. So we're absolutely delighted that you are able to join us here today, because you cover both the gender equality as well as the obviously digital creative industries that are so important for our sector. To kick this off, we are today in 2021. And despite being part of the United Nations Sustainability Goals number 5 and of the policy agenda for many years, we're quite not there yet in terms of gender equality. This is why we need organizations like Women in Games to support women and to drive the agenda forward. So, June, would you like to add something before I kick off with the first question for this talk?
Well, just to say, I'm absolutely delighted to be here. So thank you, Anne, and thank you, Women in Games. Hello to you all.
Thank you, June. So let's kick off. We have about 4 questions that we hope will bring some insight to our audience. So let's go. June, so gender equality, as we said, it's been a priority for Europe for many years. Ursula von der Leyen, who is the current president of the European Commission, she has put gender equality really high up on the agenda. And the aim is to make progress, I think, by 2025 towards a gender equal Europe. So what are the Commission's main actions for driving this agenda forward?
Yeah, so there's a lot to fit in and to tell you about. I think, first of all, it's no coincidence that we have the first female president of the Commission taking equality in the broadest sense very, very seriously. So, in the very way she set up her Commission, almost gender balanced, and the fact that we have a commissioner appointed for equality, so Commissioner Dali from Malta is the Commissioner for Equality. So, we have a focal point, a single point of contact, and someone whose real portfolio responsibility is to get that equality gender in practice and to really push that forward. So for me personally, I find it a really exciting time to be working for the Commission at the moment, because we see the difference that actually, you say if you can see it, you can be it. We have really some women in very senior roles, starting with the president herself, of course, and taking that seriously. And so, as you said, for example, within DG Connect, I'm actually called Equality Coordinator. And that means that we have members of all the different parts of the Commission who belong to a task force for equality. And we look at all the Commission's different initiatives that look at policies to support persons with disabilities, to prevent discrimination on sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, and all those. And of course, gender equality is a very important element of that whole equality agenda. So lots more coordination, lots more political attention. And if you look, for example, what the Commission's adopted in its first 18 months, as a whole raft of strategies, including on gender equality, but also for persons with disabilities, the first LGBTQ strategy, for example, and so on.
Excellent. That's really impressive, and I think that's really important and encouraging to hear about that. And I don't think we probably don't speak really enough about that, and perhaps those files are not always getting the attention that they actually do merit. According to our recent joint ISFE, and EDDF survey on Europe's video game sector, we see that about 20% of the workforce is female. Some video game companies, of course, they have a much higher percentage, around 40-50%. But overall, we appear to be at 20% in Europe. This seems to be matching a little bit European Commission data, which indicate, I believe, let me look here, that about 18%, women represent about 18% in ICT positions. So our sector is just, around the same, slightly above that. But all this is too low, of course. So in order to fix that, there's obviously an evidence, skills, and education element to this. It's also to make sure, of course, that the teachers, they have the right skills in order to create a passion for ICT, for coding, for creation, and all this will also support of getting more girls into coding and STEM courses. We know here, and you see at the slide, that girls who play video games, they are 3 times more likely to pursue a STEM career than girls who don't, which research are telling us. So it's a very ambitious project in making sure that we raise these numbers. So June, we know, and I think you mentioned this to me, that the European Commission has set a very ambitious target of 20 million ICT specialists by 2030 with gender convergence. So can you tell us a little bit how the Commission will deliver on that, and what does that mean in practice?
Yes, no, you're right, Anne. It's a very ambitious target. I think we're around 8 million ICT specialists in Europe, and we know that we have a huge need for this. So, partly, we desperately need to get more women into STEM to improve diversity, because obviously, with elements of STEM like artificial intelligence, we really don't want to recreate the current world with all its limitations and its discriminations and inbuilt biases in the digital world. But also, it's a huge opportunity for women. These are great jobs, and we need to get more women studying STEM subjects and ICT in particular. So, I'm very happy to have suggestions. That I saw there's another panel actually saying, how do we get more women involved in gaming? All suggestions gratefully received. So, what are we doing about it? Well, As a recovery from the pandemic, there is huge sums of money being released for the first time to the member states, where the Commission is actually able to borrow as well as to fund things. So we have over 650 billion euros being available to the 27 member states. And of that huge sum of money, 20% has to be invested in digital. And that means that the member states, one, will be investing, for example, in infrastructures, but also we really hope that they're investing in skills. And that should be, both in making courses available to men and women, but also more courses, more pertinent courses. I'm also responsible for accessibility. That's a subject very close to my heart, to also increase diversity and access for persons with disabilities. So there is this investment by member states, which is really unprecedented in the history of Europe, to help us all recover from the pandemic. But also under this Commission, for the first time ever, we have a funding program that's dedicated to digital, in particular to digital deployment. And that's also where we have funding programs for skills, and in particular for those advanced skills in things like HPC, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and the whole data complex that goes with that. So both on the member state side, but also on the EU side, there are some really important initiatives going forward, and some really being matched by funding to try and make this difference. And as you say, to try and deliver on this hugely ambitious target, 20 million ICT specialists by 2030 with gender convergence. And I don't know which of those two aspects is actually the more challenging.
Yes, I think that was an excellent overview, and I agree with you. Which one of those two are the more challenging? But I think that is really encouraging to see how Europe is really, investing in this, and also, of course, here the member states, each European country also has a role to play in this, in making sure that it's various, putting the various actions into place also at national and at local level. So I think that is very encouraging. I think we at ISFE need to figure out a little bit how we can find out more how this can possibly benefit local development studios across Europe, for instance. So there is another topic that is close to the hearts of, I believe, our audience, and that is also female entrepreneurship. So you touched a little bit on it previously, and we know that the European Commission has several programs, whether that is supporting the creative sectors, the digital sectors, etc. And is diversity and gender equality aspect something that is today taken into account into those programs when responding for calls for proposals, etc.? Are there, anything else related, for instance, to venture capital, etc., where this gender equality aspect is taken into account?
No, I think that's really important, because as policymakers, really, we have legislation on the one hand, but legislation is never enough to bring about change, or rarely. And so using our funding to actually emphasize the values and what the change that we want to bring about is really important, and it's a great opportunity. So again, it's really exciting for this new sort of budgetary set. We have the budget for the next 7 years, 5 to 7 years, and we have these new programs. And for example, under Horizon Europe, which is where you have the really big sums of money in terms of research and innovation, from next year, then public beneficiaries, so universities, research institutes, public sector bodies, will have to have a gender equality plan if they want to receive funding. And what is particularly of interest, I think, to the gaming industry is that we support the creative industries under a program called Creative Europe. And Creative Europe also will have a diversity, and I think already perhaps has a diversity criteria, so that actually beneficiaries have to show how they're addressing diversity issues. So not just gender equality, but gender equality is a very, very important part of that. And if I can just add sort of one of the other sort of soft ways that we can try and bring about change is by, campaigns, by raising awareness. And so this year at the Cannes Film Festival, under a female Vice President, Jourova, she launched a really interesting innovative campaign, I think, called Character. I think we're going to see the link later on. If not, I can put it in the chat. And that's really tackling stereotypes in terms of roles within the audiovisual industry, and obviously including gaming within that. So particularly from this gender bias, that really saying, you know, there are no jobs in the audiovisual industry that women can't do, and that we need to, you know, we need to promote good female role models. And there's some really interesting women who are involved with that campaign. It's been done with a French NGO, but it's, you know, the application is Europe-wide. So that's, you know, another example of how we're trying to bring about change through raising awareness, challenging stereotypes, and really hopefully encouraging the next generation of women and of girls to, you know, to make a difference and not feel limited in what they can do.
Excellent. Well, that's great. I think that you know, I think that mix what you just talked about, you know, of course legislation, but you know, there's also the funding aspect, and you're also mentioning the campaigns, and what we see also is, of course, the whole structure and grassroots development of women in games is also part of that mix to drive change. So that's a great example that you shared, and very happy to we'll promote it later at the end on the slide. And I think you'll also be able to meet tomorrow at our booth one of the persons behind the campaign Character. So we're coming to our final point, because this is really a quick overview to, you know, get knowledge about what European policymaking can help, can support also the work that our audience is doing and is passionate about. But so your unit is also in charge of the Safer Internet strategy. And that aims also for a better internet for kids, of course, but also striving to promote inclusion, diversity. You also mentioned accessibility, June, and by that also in a way setting role models for children. So we obviously believe that equality, inclusion, and diversity in the workforce does lead to more diverse video game content. And I think that the video game sector has done a huge, you know, is really at the forefront on that because of the interactive element in video games. You're able to choose your character. Characters are hugely diverse. You can also choose scenarios, etc., just to have a very personal gameplay experience. And that is, of course, important for those that are playing the games, for children as well as adults, and precisely what you mentioned earlier too, June, to avoid pushing stereotypes. So can you share with us a little bit how gender equality is promoted within the Safer Internet program? Because that's obviously addressing the kids for our future
Yes.
generation. You know, if you want to end off with a final tips idea for this audience, this is your chance.
Oh, thank
Please.
you. And I appreciate that chance. So if there's anyone in the audience who's a parent, I would strongly recommend you look at our betterinternetforkids.eu portal. I'll put that in the chat as well, because that's really our sort of one-stop shop for all the resources that we have across Europe by different ages, different languages from different countries. Really, really useful portal there. We, of course, children, you know, may face very similar problems online regardless of gender, but we also know that girls are particularly affected by sexual harassment, some of the exposure to harmful content around eating disorders, about self-harm, and that a girl's online experience may be very different from a boy's. That's not to say that boys aren't also the subject of sexual harassment and sexual abuse. It's still a problem for both genders. But for girls in particular, in sort of teenage years, being exposed to content that they don't want, being pressurized into sending nudes. There's a recent report in UK saying this has just become so ubiquitous in schools that kids don't even think about reporting it, think it's actually normal. This is just what life is like. Now, there are different reasons why that situation may have arisen, but obviously we want to equip all young people with the skills to cope, the resilience to cope with these challenges, but also that they grow up to be confident and really competent digital adults. You know, society is digital now, whether for work, for public sector, laughter, for, you know, socializing, for contact. You need to have those digital skills, and we don't want people to be put off by having really harmful and upsetting digital experiences in their early years. And this is why the work we do on the Safer Internet policy, I think, is so important. So we have Safer Internet centres in virtually all the member states. They're sort of a one-stop shop. They go into schools, they talk to kids, they talk to parents, and we have helplines there as well. And they really are our eyes and ears and our hands and voices on the ground across Europe, doing this really good work to try and equip young people. You know, the best defense really is in the head. If we can help children themselves have the resilience to meet some of these challenges, or to know where to go if they have unpleasant experiences, and how to report that, and not to be afraid to say they have problems online, because we know that a lot of children don't report because they feel that somehow it's their fault, because they've got themselves into tricky situations, when in fact often it's the subject of grooming or of pressure or of cyberbullying, and that we need to really encourage a healthy and a positive digital childhood for our children of both sexes. But as I say, given that girls face particular challenges, you know, and sadly in online games as well, where misogyny can still be quite a thing, and we really see the opportunities, you know, in online gaming. As you said yourself, you know, girls 3 times more likely to go on to study STEM. These are the really positive experiences that we want to encourage. So the Safer Internet strategy is about protection, but it's also about empowerment for young people.
Thank you, June. I think that was a very passionate and actually very important ending of this conference. And like you, I would join everybody to look into the resources that you have at the Better Internet for Kids portal. ISFI is supportive of this. We are regularly providing resources, etc. And I think this is also, you know, this audience, Women in Games audience, is a really good place to talk about these topics as well, which we're also doing in other sessions. With this, we're looking forward to your questions, and we have a last slide, I think, where we are going to put our contact details. So if you have any questions regarding European policy initiatives, funding, etc., that June very eloquently told us about, if there's anything you want to find out about your European trade body is doing in Brussels, then you can get in touch with me. And we have also included here the campaign that June pointed to, character.eu, which will also be present in our booth tomorrow. Thank you very much.